How would you advise parents or students for US university admissions?
You need a very wide base. A lot of things they do a little bit of, and you need a very sharp spike. Something you really go really deep. The spike helps you to stand out. It helps you to really be different from the rest.
Is sports a good thing to bet on for that spike?
For most people, no. For things like sports and even for performing arts, it's only really going to work for you as a spike if you're in the top 0.1%.
What if you're not really good at anything? Then how? If you don't have gifts in these things, what's the spike, man?
I'll say then pursue your passion.
What if the student's like, my passion is to be a Twitch streamer? You laugh because you know it's true. I think as much as we want our kids to excel, you also don't want to over-engineer their lives. How much can we still rely on your child's resume taking shape organically?
It's an unfortunate reality.
Alright, so today we got Daryl back on the show again.
Hello.
Co-founder of Griffin Education. I want to tap on your expertise again right here. Having worked in admissions consulting for so many years. I think traditionally, a lot of people that come for admissions consulting, they do so for US universities. I think that was the birth of the industry, really. But of course, as we talked about in the previous episode, I think even local universities, people are asking for help these days. But if we just focus on US for a moment, I think one of the things that people always struggle with is the need to build a resume for US university admissions, because that's something really new, right? I mean, if you just look at Singapore and UK, that's not a need. It's something that's really niche for the US. So how would you advise parents or students when they say, I need to build a resume, I need extracurriculars? How do you choose? What's better? What's good?
Okay, so for US universities, the easiest way to understand it is you need a very wide base. So a lot of things they kind of do a little bit of, right? And you need a very sharp spike. Okay, the focus here being on the spike. The spike is what's really important, where something you really go really deep. I see that because the base is something that, if you do your exploration properly, if you expose yourself to different things, you will organically kind of get there, right? You try a bit like your 5-year-old child.
Yeah. Organically.
you do a bit of sports, a bit of performing arts, a bit of volunteering, a bit of everything really. But the thing here is when or what do you choose to focus your time on? That spike. And how do you choose to apply it, right? What are the things that you actually do?
I want to talk a little bit about the spike, right? So I feel like in Singapore especially, a lot of parents gravitate towards sports as one of the... I think the second one being musical instruments, but we can get there later, right? So is sports a good thing to bet on for that spike?
Great question. So I would say, definitely if you are interested in sport, right? If you want to do it just to de-stress or you really enjoy it, go ahead and do it. Right. But for things like sports and even for things like performing arts, like, playing the piano or playing the violin, it's only really going to work for you as a spike if you're in the top 0.1%. And that's just the reality, right? And honestly, it's so hard to get there. You need raw talent, you need hard work, you need perseverance. So for most people, no. It's typically not a good thing to bet.
So it's kind of like maybe start doing the sport when you're 4 or 5, but kind of know when to call it quits, at least from a university admissions perspective. I mean, you can still do it for fun. It's okay to have one of those things, right? But just not something that you can bank on.
It's very, very hard. And I think even for people who are naturally gifted and put in the work, right, you'll find that typically that's all they can do. Like if you look at any student who's a national swimmer or is ranked very highly in tennis, right? That's all they can really spend their time on because they just need to put in that much time.
So the point is, if you want to do sports and you want that to be your spike, actually you let the spike find you and you can't go hunting for it, right? That's what you're saying, right?
You need to have the aptitude. I think you need to have some kind of minimum talent, raw talent to even start with.
And that's true for performing arts and instrument and drama and all that too.
I would say so, yeah.
Cool. What about... So I want to dive deeper into this notion of a spike. Why is that spike important and how necessary is it to correlate with like your intended major? Like, how do the US universities view that? So why do you need the spike? And how correlated does it have to be?
So if you think of why the spike is important, you can think back to how the university admissions selection process happens in the US, right? Because they try to evaluate students holistically, but that comes with its pitfalls as well. Because you get too many students that it's hard to find someone that you would say yes to and someone that you would say no to, right? So the spike helps you to stand out. It helps you to really be different from the rest. And that gives them a rationale to say that, hey, this is a student that I want, right? So I would say that that's, in a sense, why you need the spike. Sorry, what's the second question again?
Like, how correlated does it have to be with, like, what you're applying to?
In the US, it doesn't really need to be correlated, right? I mean, ideally, I would say it'd be good if it could be correlated, just because, eventually, if you're going to study the major, if you're going to work towards that career, you want to have that expertise as well, right? But you could see someone whose spike could be in something like mental health awareness, right? But their career could be more towards like math, statistics, data science, computer science. You can pursue both at the same time, of course, right? But if you put your spike in math and all that kind of stuff, right? In a way, it's more efficient for you because you need to do fewer things.
How do we? I think on this note, right? It's useful to also distinguish between extracurriculars that you do outside of school.
Enrichment you're talking about, yeah.
Right, yeah. And like CCAs in school. Like how do we think of that? Because obviously, I mean, when we are talking about younger children, like, below 7, even below 9, because I think more doors open up in secondary school. But at a younger age, a lot of the grooming and the development has to be outside of school. So you pay for enrichment, right? But once CCAs come into the equation, how do we balance that? Like, is CCA more valuable or are the outside things more valuable? Like, kind of, how do we go about?
So I think from a practical standpoint, students will end up doing both. You can't really just only do CCA,
of course, yeah.
Or only do enrichment. But I would say the way to think about the outside stuff is to think of it maybe as an extension of your CCA. Right? And I say that because, if you go in and apply for a university, you see student A who has only school CCAs. That tends to be more of a cookie cutter, a more normal kind of resume, right? Versus student B who has school CCAs plus has applied themselves outside of school. So back to the mental health example, right? You could be on the school mental health awareness club president, right? But then Singapore, there could be many of those already. Yeah, you don't stand out at all. But if you choose to take that and apply it outside, you organize an activity, involve other organizations in Singapore, that becomes a much bigger deal.
So I'm just linking this to looking at it as a package. I mean, if you bring the CCA, school CCA into the picture, right? So school CCA must be packaged together with other enrichments. I mean, it can be unrelated. Like example, you can be a sports person in school. Then coming back to the factor that you have to be in sports is very difficult when you do the spike, as you're all mentioning. You have to be one of the best. Like sports, I keep hearing from my students. Basically, what happens is that if you're not ranked like 1 to 10, top 10 in your age group or your playing group in that sport, then I think it's not worth putting the effort into it. I don't know whether I'm right. Maybe later you can add on that. Because example like table tennis, if you're not like ranked top 5 in Singapore in the under 18 category, then there's no point putting it in the resume. Do you agree?
I mean, if you spend substantial amount of time, you will still put it in, but it may not be an impressive spike, right? Whereas if you choose to put your time into something else that you're also passionate about, right? That could be something a lot more compelling than, let's say, you are just another table tennis player in Singapore. Yeah,
like I think that's the main thing. What is more compelling when it comes to this kind of thing when you want to put in your resume, right? Is it good to change after some time? Like example, let's say student A, okay, right, is going into sports. And then he plays for a few years, but he's not in the zonal, he's not in the national level already. He's just a regular team player in the sports, right? So is it good that after that particular moment he checks this out, the reality that he's not going to be one of the top 10 in Singapore and under for the age group, then explore other things.
For sure. For sure, especially if his aim is to get into, I would say, mainly for US admissions, to some extent Singapore admissions as well, right? Because that's something that was going to help him or her to stand out, right? That's going to be the spike for him or her. More compelling spike than being just another regular sports player.
I think Naga's question brings up another interesting question, which is, we talked a lot about like the propensity and the skill and the aptitude, right? So like, what if you're not really good at anything? Then how do you, right? I mean, let's be realistic here, right? How do you engineer? I mean, and I'm not saying this from a very cruel perspective, but the reality is that, I mean, between the three of us, I don't know, right? We're not going to be good enough like in like some sport to be like top 0.1% or instrument or whatever, because you need a gift for that. So if you don't have gifts in these things, then how? Like, what's the spike, man? Like,
Can
how do
anybody be not gifted in no things?
Well, that's a conversation for another. That's a different episode. We will film a different episode for that. What happened if I'm not good for it with anything? But I mean, back to you, Daryl. Like, how do you get that spike?
I would say then pursue like your passion.
How does that work?
Pursue your passion. So if there's something that you're really, really passionate about, right? You can actually pursue what I call a personal independent passion project. It could be anything. It could be like maybe you really want to, raise the awareness of mental health problems in teenagers in Singapore, right? Using that as an example, right? You don't need to be gifted in anything to do that. You just need to put in the work. You just need to make sure that you can do something that, resonates with people, right? So for example, if you set up a campaign, right, starting with your own school maybe, just to have a one-day event to raise awareness for this, set up an Instagram account, maybe push it to other schools in your neighborhood, Singapore, international. You can see how this can show that you have made an impact in something that you are passionate about, something that you want to influence, something you want to change, right? That's actually very impressive, right? It shows a lot of initiative.
What if the student's like, my passion is to be a Twitch streamer? Would that work?
To some extent it could.
You laugh because you know it's true.
To some extent it could.
Reality.
Because in reality, you see some of the most influential people right now are streamers.
Yeah.
All right, I'm talking about, I don't know, I know Mr. Beast, right?
That's going to make our life very difficult in the classroom, because a lot of students are like, oh, I'll be a YouTuber.
Yeah.
I'll be
Why need to study?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, theoretically possible, but practically speaking, it's not easy.
Yeah, so how do you marry that? Like, how do you advise a student/parent that goes, my grades are not that important, and I want to be a Twitch streamer, but I want to go to US and study. How do we tie all of those things together?
I would break down what it takes to become a good Twitch streamer.
Sure.
And I want them to focus on all those different things.
So it's possible to build a passion project around that.
It's possible, right? But of course, you want it to be for the sake of something good, right? So even if it's, let's say, an entertainment kind of thing that you have in Twitch, maybe you are gaming, right? It could be gaming to raise funds for stray cats in Singapore, for example, right? You want to work towards it in a different way. And then when I say breakdown, right? You want to break down what are the different skill sets that you need to become a successful Twitch streamer. Because it may so happen that a student realizes that actually they don't want to be a Twitch streamer, right? But they want to be good at speaking to people. They want to be someone who is charming, right? They want to be someone who is persuasive. Or they want to be someone who is maybe funny, right? So all these things can be used in different contexts, not necessarily streaming on Twitch or streaming on YouTube.
Yeah, that's fair. I think just to switch gears here a little bit, I mean, we talked a lot about US and, the need to stand out. How much of this is necessary in Singapore and, the UK university context? Would you say not at all? Would you say, must everything be major related? How
I would say like
differ?
90+% should be major related, right? Academic related. And I want to maybe point out one thing, which is the recent change in the UK admissions essay, right? The system called the UCAS essay prompt. They've added one prompt where it actually goes beyond just pure academics. It goes into, let's say, your career-related aspirations. Or maybe even something like what kind of work experience do you have, right? So that's something that I think we see an increasing trend in, right? So something that you definitely want to try to work towards. And the reason I say 90%, right, is because of course there's still that 10% where these things make a tangible impact on who you are as a person, and will therefore also affect how you pursue all those other 90% stuff, right? These are all the soft skills. You will not be a complete person if you only just focus on one subject. I don't think anybody can be like that.
Yeah. I think just coming back to one of the things you mentioned earlier, about when we were talking about the Twitch streaming and the passion project thing. I think one thing that a lot of people find intimidating when thinking of activities outside of CCAs, outside of enrichment, is that how in the world do they get started on these things? Like, where do you start? I mean, you raise great ideas, right? Obviously, Twitch streaming to raise funds for cats and and all that. But how does a student know where to start, how to start, what KPIs are they supposed to hit? How to. I think there's always this question mark about how much credibility do these side projects have. What's your experience with that?
Yeah, one of the things which I agree. I think he just subconsciously said, you have to do it, the project, or create awareness at your family, your school, other schools, zonal level in the community. So this is the zone thing, right? So you're talking about credibility. That's how it becomes more credible. That means you have done it at different levels.
Right.
The project has grown.
Yep.
The amount of impact it has made on society. I think these kind of things.
But how do you
make
prove
sense.
it? You see? That's the thing. What? How do you package that into the application?
It's social proof.
Right.
It's very social proof, right? It's like, okay, my Instagram account has how many followers, right? It has impacted how many lives. You have raised how much funds, how many events have you held, right? How many people attended those events? How big is your volunteer base, right? And I would say, is when you look at what people have built, just understand that sometimes people spend many years building these projects, right? You're not going to start from, you're not going to get there immediately, right? Like Naga said, you need to start, let's say, even just start from your family.
Yeah. Small
right?
thing, right? Yeah.
Your school, right? And then your community, and then you try and get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Of course, you want to try and push it as far as you can, right? But you start small.
How would you advise students to scaffold their passion projects? I think I hear you about the social proof and all that. I think that makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot of question about how do we even get started? How do we start? What's the 10-step plan? What are the checkpoints I need to hit? Because it just feels so open-ended. I think that's what's holding a lot of students back, right? And then when it's too open-ended, sometimes they don't see it through. They start for a month or two and they get discouraged and they don't know where to go after that. So what's kind of a good general framework and approach to these passion projects?
I think you need to know, what you want to achieve with the passion project, right? So have a feasible, practical goal, right? Of course, you can also have a stretch goal. So it could be very easy. You could be like, okay, I just want to make sure that I organize one event. Let's say I managed to attract 20 volunteers, right? And let's say the event is attended by 50 to 100 people. That's a goal, right? And then once you have a goal, then you can, in a sense, have steps to work towards it. You know how to work towards it, right? Another thing to think about this is how much time do you have to pursue this? If you're starting from the age of 15, yeah, you have plenty of time. Maybe then it wouldn't feel that stressful. If you're starting from the age of 17, maybe even 18, right? Then you need to be a lot more careful. The project might not grow as big as you want it to grow, right? And you may need to, in a sense, temper expectations a little bit more, right? But I'll say definitely start with something that you want to achieve, work towards it, and maybe have a stretch goal, something that you may want to achieve beyond that.
Cool. I guess my last question, just to wrap things up. I think from a parent perspective, even for myself and I guess for Naga, I think as much as we want our kids to excel, you also don't want to over-engineer their lives. And I guess unfortunately with the way the landscape is and you're applying to university, some degree of engineering is required, right? But how much can we still rely on your child's resume taking shape organically? Like, how do we not over-engineer that? Like, is there a world where just engaging your kid and seeing what they are interested in and just letting them, do the various things, like to what extent will that let's take Ivy Leagues out of the equation, right? Let's just talk about
basic plan.
A strong enough US university, or even I guess Singapore and UK to a lesser extent. What kind of more middle of the road approach can we take to extracurriculars?
So I really think, not to sidestep your question, but a little bit, right? I think you need to think about timing. I think timing is very, very important. Because if a student is still young, and broadly speaking, below the age of 15, or even to push it a bit further, below the age of 17, right? They can afford to be as organic as they want to be, right? Especially for Singapore universities, especially for UK universities, right? You can afford to be because you don't need that many non-subject related extracurriculars, right? So you can really be extremely organic. But I think what is something is an unfortunate reality is that at some point you need to lock in. At some point you need to lock in, right? At some point you need to realize that, okay, right, I only have this amount of time. I can't be just doing stuff depending on how I feel. And especially if you have a goal, right? If you have no goal, then I guess you can be as organic as you want, right? But you may not end up in a place where you want to be, or you may end up in a situation where you look back and be like, oh, I should have spent a bit more time thinking about what I want to do.
Yeah,
right?
which I guess you're saying that more from, as you said, I think you started this conversation and the last conversation with the notion that there's this greater demand for the top schools. And
it's just getting harder. I mean, it's getting harder for top schools. And that also means it's getting harder for the schools in the middle, right? It's just getting harder across the board, right? And not just for university admissions, also for the job market. Everything's just getting harder and harder, right? So it's just the unfortunate reality that we need to grapple with. You can be very, very organic, but there will come a point where you need to decide, right? And I would say you want to make sure that you're in a position where you decide and not in a position where things are decided for you because of choices you made or didn't make.
Yeah, it's fair.